Welcome in, guys. Adam here, the Orlando drummer. Good to see you all. Thank you for tuning into another single lesson. So in today's single lesson, we're tackling a pretty unique 16th note fill, but there's a lot of cool elements and little chunky patterns within this measure of 16th notes. So we're going to talk about those as we go, and maybe you guys will get some additional ideas out of this lesson. It's definitely, it doesn't have to just be the 16th note fill that you can see on the screen, though I do think this sequence or this phrase is pretty cool. So as always, we'll play it up to speed, then we'll break this down beat by beat, kind of explore what's happening within the pattern or the phrase itself. And then we'll play this at a few different tempos so you guys can just sort of hear the progression of what this sounds like as it speeds up. Let's hear it up to speed. Here we go. Now, one thing to definitely keep in mind about this measure is that it doesn't really have a home tempo. I think this sequence of notes sounds good at multiple different tempos. So where I played it was not quite as fast as we could take it. I think we could really push the speed, and it sounds awesome, especially the first half of the groove, the first half of the fill, which we're gonna talk about. It actually can turn into a groove, but either way, keep that in mind. A lot of different tempos that this works at, and as you change that tempo, whether you slow it down or speed it up from what you just saw me play, it definitely has its place, right? It sounds cool in a lot of different speeds. So let's break down beat one, our first four notes, 1 E and da. The pattern we're basing this around is right, left kick. I want you to accent that right hand or just give it a little bit of volume. Ghost note the left hands, then add a kick drum. That 4-note pattern would sound like this. Now for this particular measure, we're taking that right hand and putting it on the hi-hat, and we're adding a kick drum underneath that. So our pattern is right up on the hi-hat with a kick drum underneath it, left ghost note on the snare, then a kick drum all by itself. Let's just play that. Now you'll notice in the notation and in the example that I played in the beginning, I opened or barked that very first right hand on the hi-hat that's on the downbeat of 1. So if we add a bark to that hi-hat, we would have this. Now one thing to pay attention to is you have an option here of how long you want to open that hi-hat. If you want to let it sing out completely, you can do that. Keep in mind that we're not returning to the hi-hat for the remainder of this measure. So if you want to let it open and just sort of slosh around like that, you can totally do that. I think it sounds pretty cool that way. Or the other choice that you have is you can bark it nice and tight, like a 16th note or a 32nd note, really staccato and short. Your call if you want to do that. But if we tighten up the hi-hat, we would have this sort of sound. Either way, totally up to you. That is the first 4 notes, so a few choices to mess around with there. Now when we get into beat 2, this is actually a little easier to remember because this is just a left-hand lead paradiddle. Left, right, left, left. Now the way we're playing this is I'm giving a little bit of volume to that left hand that's on the snare, right? Because it's kind of functioning as our backbeat within the fill, falls on the downbeat of 2. Then your right hand goes over to the bell of the ride cymbal. So we have a loud left, right hand on the bell, 2 left hand ghost notes. So all of beat 2 is just this. Not too bad. Now, we're going to connect this to the first 4 notes that we learned. So we're going to play the first half of this measure, or 8 notes. But one thing that we can do, we'll play it how it's written first, but then afterwards I'm going to show you how this is actually a really cool groove if we just isolate those 8 notes. You might be able to hear it in this example. So let's play it exactly as it's written on the screen first, the first 8 notes of the measure. Now we can actually turn these 8 notes into a groove like I was saying. The way to do that at first is just to leave that right hand on the same surface the 2 times that the right hand happens. So don't worry about moving it from the hi-hat to the bell. Just try leaving everything on the hi-hat. We would have this. We can also choose to not open that first hi-hat. Gives it a little bit more of a tightened up feel. And keep in mind you can move that right hand to different surfaces. What about all on the bell? All sorts of options, definitely a cool little groove mannerism that you can explore with and move around the kit. You can also use this to just freely phrase around the kit, especially if you take away that first kick drum that's underneath that right hand. Well, then you have just a kind of a linear pattern that's a little bit easier to move around without that kick drum underneath that right hand. So plenty of options there. Just wanted you to be aware that it's a cool little chunk of notes, that 8-note pattern that you can take away from this fill. So now let's go into beats 3 and 4, or the last half of the measure. Here, we're breaking up these 8 notes into a pattern, or a grouping rather, of 5 notes, and then a grouping of 3 notes. So our grouping of 5 is kick, flam, right, left, left. So a kick and then a flammed paradiddle. Now the way we're orchestrating this is interesting. We have the flam being played with the right hand over on the floor tom, left hand on the snare. You can play that nice and loud. And immediately after that, I want you to throw down another right hand on the floor tom, right? So those notes, let's just say 3, E, and the first 3 notes of beat 3 would be this. Now we're adding 2 left-hand ghost notes to the end of that, and that completes this 5-note grouping that we talked about. So those 5 notes with the left-hand diddle added on would be this. Cool little 5-note grouping if you want to just loop that around. Useful for all sorts of different things. So then at the end of this, the last 3 notes to close out the fill, we have kick, right, left. The right hand is on the floor tom, left hand is on the snare, which is very convenient because you are still going to be in that position from the 5-note grouping, right? So that would just be kick, right, left, super easy. And before we tie everything together, let's just play these last 8 notes. We can actually loop these last 8 notes, and they also sound pretty cool, isolated, just like the first 8 notes. You know, a lot of function out of those, even outside of the context of this fill. So the last 8 notes on a loop would be this. Super cool, linear, choppy sort of variation. I guess it's not linear because of the flam, but it feels linear, really sequential, chunky, gospel-y sort of mannerism there. So really cool. So now we're going to tie everything together. No magic tricks, no secrets. It's just a matter of hearing all of these different groupings and patterns combined into one larger, more cohesive phrase. And if that's something that you're not very good at right now, and you say, man, I just can't hear all of these together, even if you can hear these little chunks, one thing that might help is working through the grouping masterclasses that are here on the site. The grouping masterclasses are designed to sort of expose you to some of these different number combinations. So what does it sound like when we have a 3-note grouping next to a 5-note grouping? What does it sound like to take a 4-note grouping and lead into more of an odd note grouping, right? So mixing the even and odd number groups. The grouping masterclasses 101 through 105, those are really going to help you understand, or just expose you to, rather, some of these different grouping combinations. So that will hopefully simplify this, because this is, I would say, an upper intermediate, borderline advanced phrase. So with all that said, let's give it a shot. We're going to keep this nice and slow at first. We're going to stay at a very, very low tempo, as slow as we can get away with. Then we will slowly increase the speed, and I'll try to push this one nice and fast, because, again, it does sound pretty good up to a higher speed when it's pushed there. Let's give it a shot, guys. Here we go. Thank you for watching this clip. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're looking to in any way make yourself a better drummer online, which let's be honest, you probably are, that's why you click this video, make sure to click the link in the description or the link that's around here somewhere. Free 7-day trial to my online drum school. You'll find 160 hours of drum lessons there and one of the world's largest collections of drumless play-alongs. Trust me, you will find something you love, and I would love to have you on board. OrlandoDrummer.com. I will see you there.